Right now, as you watch this video, you're experiencing a battle that began over 2,000 years ago between two empires that never officially met in war. Every app you use, every law that protects you, every piece of technology in your hands carries DNA from this ancient rivalry. But which civilization actually won? Picture this. In 184 AD, while Roman Emperor Commodus was busy fighting gladiators in the Colosseum for his own twisted entertainment, halfway across the world, Chinese engineers were perfecting seismographs that could detect earthquakes from hundreds of miles away. Two superpowers, two completely different approaches to civilization, both convinced they represented the pinnacle of human achievement. Rome built an empire like a Hollywood blockbuster, loud, spectacular, impossible to ignore. When Roman legions marched into your territory, you knew it immediately. The eagles gleamed, the armor clanked, the message was crystal clear. Resistance was futile, but submission came with incredible perks. Roman cities were advertisements for Roman power, with their massive amphitheaters, soaring aqueducts, and marble temples that seemed to touch the gods themselves. China operated more like a master hacker, infiltrating systems so elegantly that victims often didn't realize they'd been compromised until it was too late. Chinese innovations spread through trade routes like a benevolent virus, transforming civilizations from the inside out. A Korean king might never see a Chinese soldier, but his scribes were using Chinese characters, his scholars were quoting Confucius, and his entire worldview was being quietly reshaped by Chinese philosophy. Here's what makes this fascinating. Both strategies worked brilliantly, but they created completely different types of lasting influence. Rome was the master of hard power, the kind of dominance you could see, hear, and feel. Every Roman road was a statement. We were here, we transformed this place, and we're never really leaving. Roman law didn't just govern behavior. It rewrote how people thought about justice, citizenship, and human rights. The Roman system was intoxicating because it offered something revolutionary: social mobility through merit. A Spanish farm boy could become emperor. Hello, Trajan. A Germanic tribesman could command legions. An African could govern provinces. Rome didn't just conquer your body, it convinced your soul that becoming Roman was an upgrade to your humanity. China perfected soft power centuries before the term was invented. The Chinese approach was based on a simple but profound insight. People naturally gravitate towards superior culture when they recognize it. Why force conversion when you can make people desperate to convert themselves? Chinese civilization was designed to be irresistibly attractive. More sophisticated literature, more advanced technology, more elegant philosophy, better administrative systems. The mandate of heaven wasn't just political propaganda, it was a comprehensive theory of civilization that made Chinese cultural superiority seem like a law of nature. Neighboring peoples weren't conquered, they were enlightened. They sent their brightest sons to study in Chinese academies, adopted Chinese writing systems, and gradually rebuilt their societies according to Chinese models. But here's where it gets really interesting. The technological philosophies reveal everything about these civilizations' core differences. Roman engineering was magnificent but focused. Build roads that last forever, create aqueducts that defy gravity, design siege engines that crush any resistance. Roman technology was always about solving specific problems with overwhelming competence. Chinese innovation operated on a completely different level. They weren't just solving problems, they were reimagining what human civilization could become. Gunpowder didn't just change warfare, it democratized violence and ended the age of knights. Paper didn't just provide writing surfaces, it made knowledge affordable for common people. The compass didn't just help navigation, it enabled global exploration and connected isolated continents. The economic models were equally revealing. Rome built a sophisticated extraction machine. Provinces sent raw materials and tribute to the center, which transformed them into luxury goods and spectacular entertainment. It was brilliant, profitable, and completely unsustainable without constant expansion. Rome was essentially a pyramid scheme disguised as a civilization. China created something more like a modern ecosystem. Specialized regions trading their advantages, technological innovations spreading organically, wealth flowing in multiple directions. The Silk Road wasn't just about Chinese exports, it was a circulatory system that made diverse civilizations healthier and more connected. Even their approaches to religion showed fundamental differences. Rome was pragmatically polytheistic. Absorb whatever gods your subjects worship, rebrand them with Latin names, use religious festivals to maintain social order. When Christianity became politically useful, Rome adopted it with the same pragmatic calculation. Religion was a tool for social cohesion, not spiritual truth-seeking. China developed something more sophisticated, complementary philosophical systems that addressed different human needs. Confucianism provided social order and personal ethics. Taoism offered spiritual balance and connection with natural rhythms. Buddhism, imported and transformed, addressed questions about suffering and transcendence. Instead of one rigid system, Chinese culture offered a buffet of wisdom traditions. The resilience strategies were completely different too. Rome survived crises through reinvention. Split the empire, move the capital, reform the military, change the official religion. Flexibility was Rome's superpower, but it was reactive flexibility, responding to threats after they emerged. China developed anti-fragile systems, structures that actually got stronger under stress. Dynastic cycles weren't bugs in the Chinese system, they were features. Each collapse taught lessons that made the next iteration more robust. The mandate of heaven provided a framework for legitimate political change that preserved cultural continuity through governmental chaos. In 166 AD, Roman merchants finally reached the Chinese court after traveling for over a year along the Silk Road. They expected to dazzle the barbarians with Roman luxury goods. Instead, they found a civilization that made Rome look like a frontier town. This wasn't just a trade meeting, it was the moment two completely different theories of human progress finally met face to face. The Roman export model was breathtakingly effective because it was essentially civilization as franchise. Every new province got the same package: Roman law, Latin language, urban planning, bathhouses, amphitheaters, and a clear path to citizenship for local elites. It was McDonald's for empires, standardized, efficient, and irresistibly appealing to people who'd never experienced anything like it. But here's the genius part. Rome didn't just impose this system. They made local populations desperately want it. A Gallic chieftain's son could see Roman lifestyle up close and think, I want my children to have access to those schools, those opportunities, that sophisticated urban culture. Romanization wasn't forced conversion, it was aspirational upgrade. The process was psychologically brilliant. Romans would arrive in a new territory and immediately begin construction projects that seemed magical to local populations. Aqueducts brought clean water to places that had never imagined such abundance. Roads connected isolated communities to a vast network of trade and communication. Amphitheaters provided entertainment on a scale that redefined what was possible. More importantly, Romans offered something that most ancient peoples had never experienced: upward mobility based on merit rather than birth. A talented provincial could study law, join the military, accumulate wealth, and eventually become indistinguishable from old Roman families. This wasn't just political integration, it was social revolution. The Chinese system operated completely differently, but was arguably more sophisticated. Instead of franchise expansion, China created what we might call civilizational magnetism. Chinese culture was designed to be so obviously superior that neighboring peoples would voluntarily adopt Chinese practices without any coercion. The tributary system was genius-level soft power. Instead of conquering Korea, Vietnam, or Japan, China essentially said, "Look, we're clearly the most advanced civilization in this region. Send us some gifts annually, acknowledge our cultural leadership, and we'll share our technological innovations, trade networks, and philosophical wisdom." Most neighboring rulers found this offer irresistible. The educational component was crucial. Chinese academies didn't just teach practical skills, they transmitted an entire worldview. Students learned classical Chinese literature, Confucian ethics, administrative techniques, and artistic traditions. When these students returned home, they brought Chinese civilization with them like cultural ambassadors. This created something unprecedented: international elite networks that shared fundamental values and reference points. An educated Korean official could communicate with Vietnamese scholars and Japanese nobles, not just linguistically, but conceptually. They'd all been shaped by the same philosophical traditions and cultural frameworks. The technological diffusion patterns reveal everything about these civilizations' core strategies. Roman innovations spread through military conquest and administrative necessity. When Romans built roads, aqueducts, or fortifications, they were solving immediate logistical problems. Other peoples adopted Roman techniques because they were obviously superior for specific applications. Chinese innovations spread through voluntary adoption because they enhanced general human capability. Printing technology didn't just help Chinese bureaucrats. It revolutionized information storage and transmission everywhere it appeared. Gunpowder didn't just strengthen Chinese military, it fundamentally altered power relationships throughout Eurasia. The magnetic compass didn't just help Chinese navigation, it enabled global maritime exploration. Here's what's fascinating. Chinese innovations often spread faster than Chinese political control. The compass reached Arab navigators centuries before they had direct contact with China. Paper-making techniques traveled through Islamic lands and reached Europe through Spanish translation centers. Gunpowder formulas spread along trade routes independent of Chinese military campaigns. This happened because Chinese technology was designed to be universally beneficial rather than strategically exclusive. Romans guarded military secrets carefully and used technological advantages to maintain dominance. Chinese inventors seemed to assume that improving general human capabilities would ultimately benefit Chinese civilization, even if competitors gained temporary advantages. The legal systems reveal profound philosophical differences. Roman law was revolutionary because it established uniform standards across diverse populations. Whether you lived in Britain, Egypt, or Spain, the same legal principles applied. Roman jurisprudence created concepts like innocent until proven guilty, burden of proof, and equal treatment under law that still form the foundation of modern legal systems. Chinese legal philosophy was more nuanced and arguably more sophisticated. Instead of rigid codes uniformly applied, Chinese governance emphasized moral education, social harmony, and contextual justice. The ideal wasn't mechanical law enforcement but cultivating virtue in both rulers and subjects so that formal laws became unnecessary. This created different types of social stability. Roman provinces were held together by shared institutions and legal frameworks. Chinese cultural zones were unified by shared values and philosophical assumptions. Roman unity was structural, Chinese unity was cultural. The commercial strategies were equally different. Rome created an integrated economic system where provinces specialized in supplying the imperial center. Egypt provided grain, Gaul provided metals, Britain provided wool. This generated enormous wealth, but created dangerous dependencies. If the center weakened, the entire system could collapse. China developed more distributed networks, where different regions contributed their advantages to a flexible system. Silk production, porcelain manufacturing, tea cultivation, and metalworking were spread across various areas, but technological innovations and trade management remained centralized enough to maintain quality standards and coordinate large-scale projects. The Silk Road exemplified this approach. China provided organizational structure and premium goods, but Arab merchants, Central Asian nomads, and Mediterranean traders all played essential roles. Everyone benefited, but China remained the system's natural center because of superior organizational capabilities and technological innovation. 476 AD, the last Western Roman emperor hands over his crown to a Germanic warlord, officially ending over 800 years of Roman dominance. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away, Chinese engineers are completing the Grand Canal, one of humanity's greatest infrastructure projects, connecting northern and southern China in an engineering feat that makes Roman aqueducts look like garden sprinklers. Same year, two empires, completely opposite trajectories. What made the difference? The Roman collapse wasn't a sudden catastrophe. It was a slow-motion system failure that reveals everything about the hidden vulnerabilities in Rome's magnificent but rigid structure. The empire that had conquered the known world couldn't adapt when the rules of that world fundamentally changed. Rome's economic model worked brilliantly during expansion phases. Conquered territories provided slaves, tribute, and raw materials that fueled urban prosperity and spectacular public entertainments. But this created a civilization addicted to conquest. When territorial expansion stopped, when there were no more easy targets to subjugate, the entire economic engine began seizing up. The barbarian invasions that supposedly destroyed Rome were actually symptoms of a much deeper problem. Germanic tribes weren't savage destroyers of civilization. They were desperate refugees, fleeing even worse pressures from Central Asian nomads. They wanted what Rome had promised but could no longer deliver: security, prosperity, and social order. Rome's response to crisis revealed both its strengths and fatal limitations. The empire showed remarkable adaptability, dividing administration between East and West, relocating the capital to Constantinople, completely restructuring the military, even changing the official religion from paganism to Christianity. These were massive pivots that few civilizations could have managed, but these adaptations treated symptoms rather than underlying causes. Rome had become too complex to sustain without constant growth. The urban civilization that Romans were so proud of required enormous resource inputs and generated relatively little productive output. When the extraction machine broke down, the cities became unsustainable. The psychological dimension was equally crucial. Roman identity was built on superiority over barbarians. When Rome could no longer maintain military and economic dominance, the foundation of Roman self-concept cracked. If Romans weren't superior to everyone else, what made them Roman at all? China faced equally devastating challenges during the same period. The Han dynasty's collapse in 220 AD triggered 3 centuries of fragmentation, civil war, and foreign invasion. The period known as the Three Kingdoms was followed by barbarian conquests that established foreign dynasties across much of Chinese territory. But China's response was fundamentally different, and this difference explains why Chinese civilization survived while Western Rome disappeared. Instead of trying to preserve failing structures, China developed systems designed to regenerate after catastrophic disruption. The key insight was the mandate of heaven concept, which normalized political change while preserving cultural continuity. Dynasties were expected to rise and fall based on their virtue and competence. This wasn't system failure, it was system maintenance. Each dynastic cycle provided opportunities to incorporate new technologies, administrative innovations, and philosophical insights. When barbarian conquerors established new dynasties in Chinese territory, they didn't destroy Chinese civilization. They were absorbed by it. The Yuan dynasty under Mongol rule became thoroughly Chinese. The Qing dynasty under Manchu control not only preserved Chinese traditions, but expanded them. Chinese culture was anti-fragile. It got stronger under pressure. The technological approaches during crisis periods were especially revealing. Romans facing barbarian pressure built bigger walls, created more professional armies, and developed increasingly complex administrative structures. More complexity required more resources, which increased vulnerability when resources became scarce. Chinese innovation during crisis periods focused on elegant solutions that increased system resilience. Movable type printing, for example, wasn't just a technological advancement. It was a cultural preservation mechanism that could maintain intellectual continuity even when political structures collapsed. Printed books could preserve knowledge independently of governmental stability. Agricultural strategies showed similar patterns. Roman latifundia, large slave-worked estates, were efficient during stable periods, but catastrophically vulnerable to disruption. When slave supplies diminished and barbarian raids increased, agricultural production collapsed, triggering urban abandonment and economic implosion. Chinese intensive agriculture based on small family farms was more resilient to political chaos. Even when dynasties fell and armies marched across the countryside, farming families could continue production. The technological improvements like new rice varieties, improved plows, and irrigation techniques spread organically through rural networks that operated independently of political authority. The social elite structures were equally important. Roman aristocracy was tied to military conquest and provincial exploitation. When these foundations crumbled, Roman elites couldn't reinvent themselves. Their wealth, status, and identity were bound to unsustainable systems. Chinese scholar bureaucrats were selected through educational achievement rather than military success or inheritance. This created a leadership class that could function during political transitions. When one dynasty fell, educated administrators could serve the next regime because their legitimacy came from competence rather than personal loyalty to specific rulers. Religious and philosophical frameworks provided different types of stability. Christianity gave Romans spiritual comfort during imperial decline, but the conversion process created internal tensions and didn't provide practical governance solutions. Late Roman Christianity was often otherworldly, focused on salvation after death rather than improving earthly conditions. Chinese philosophical synthesis, Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism offered complementary approaches to crisis management. Confucian ethics provided social stability. Taoist principles encouraged adaptation to changing circumstances, and Buddhist concepts helped people cope with suffering and uncertainty. This wasn't escapist spirituality. It was practical wisdom for managing difficult transitions. The communication and information systems were crucial. Roman administration depended on efficient message transmission along road networks. When roads became unsafe and imperial authority weakened, administrative coordination became impossible. The empire literally couldn't think clearly about its problems because its nervous system was failing. Chinese civilization maintained multiple communication channels: official bureaucratic networks, commercial trading systems, scholarly correspondence, and religious pilgrim routes. Even when political authority collapsed, information continued flowing through alternative channels, enabling recovery and reconstruction. You wake up to an alarm clock, Chinese invention. Check your phone using paper-thin circuits that evolved from Chinese papermaking. Get dressed using garments held together by Chinese-invented buttons. Then check the weather app using magnetic compass technology from China before heading to work in a car, powered by controlled explosions that perfected Chinese gunpowder principles. But you'll drive on roads designed according to Roman engineering principles, protected by legal rights derived from Roman law, in a democratic system inspired by Roman republicanism. So who really won this ancient empire war? The answer is mind-bending. We're living in a Chinese-powered Roman matrix, and most people have no idea how deep this rabbit hole goes. Every day, you experience the outcome of a 2,000-year competition between two completely different theories of human civilization. The weird part: both theories won, but in completely different dimensions. Roman victory is immediately obvious once you know what to look for. The English language you're using right now is about 60% Latin in its vocabulary. Words like government, citizen, republic, justice, civilization, democracy, liberty, and constitution aren't just Latin. They carry Roman concepts about how human societies should be organized. Modern legal systems aren't inspired by Roman law. They are Roman law with updates. Innocent until proven guilty, due process, burden of proof, habeas corpus, precedent, and jurisprudence are all Roman innovations that still protect your rights every day. When a judge says the court finds, they're participating in a Roman ritual that's been continuous for over 2 millennia. Urban planning everywhere follows Roman templates. Cities with geometric street grids, central public squares, government buildings that echo classical architecture, and public infrastructure systems are all Roman DNA expressing itself through modern materials. Washington, D.C. isn't just influenced by Roman design. It's Rome rebuilt with American characteristics. The political concepts that define modern democracy are Roman inventions that the Renaissance rediscovered and the Enlightenment refined. Separation of powers, checks and balances, representative government, federalism, and constitutional law all trace back to Roman republican innovations. Even the word Senate is literally just the Latin word for Council of Elders. But Chinese influence is more pervasive precisely because it's less obvious. The device you're watching this on contains thousands of Chinese innovations so fundamental that we've forgotten they were ever invented. The paper-thin computer chips are descendants of Chinese paper-making technology. The steel frame uses metallurgy principles Chinese developed. The glass screen uses techniques Chinese craftsmen perfected. Chinese innovations didn't just change technology, they rewrote the basic conditions of human existence. Printing technology didn't just make books cheaper, it made mass education possible, which triggered the scientific revolution, the Reformation, and the Enlightenment. Without Chinese printing, there's no Renaissance, no modern science, no democracy as we know it. The magnetic compass didn't just improve navigation, it enabled global exploration that connected isolated continents and created the first truly global economy. Without Chinese compass technology, Columbus never reaches America, Europeans never establish global trade networks, and the modern world system never develops. Gunpowder didn't just change warfare, it ended feudalism by making castle walls obsolete and night cavalry irrelevant. Medieval social structures collapsed when common soldiers with Chinese-invented firearms could defeat aristocratic warriors. Without gunpowder, we might still be living under feudal hierarchies. But here's where it gets really interesting. Modern bureaucracy is basically the Chinese civil service system with minor modifications. The idea that government positions should be filled through competitive examinations rather than inheritance or political connections is pure Chinese innovation. Modern universities, standardized testing, and merit-based hiring all evolved from Chinese administrative practices. Economic systems show this synthesis clearly. Global capitalism combines Roman property law and Chinese commercial networks. Modern corporations use Roman legal frameworks but operate through supply chains that mirror ancient Silk Road principles. Even modern money combines Chinese invention, paper currency, with Roman concepts, legal tender backed by governmental authority. The business world operates on Chinese principles we don't recognize as Chinese. Just-in-time manufacturing, quality control systems, and network-based organizational structures all have Chinese precedents. Silicon Valley's ecosystem approach to innovation is essentially a modern version of Chinese technological development strategies. Educational philosophy everywhere reflects Chinese influence. The assumption that education should cultivate complete human beings rather than just job skills comes from Confucian traditions. The idea that moral character matters as much as intellectual achievement is fundamentally Chinese. Even modern concepts like emotional intelligence echo Chinese beliefs about balanced human development. Medical approaches increasingly combine Roman systematic analysis with Chinese holistic understanding. Western medicine's diagnostic methods follow Roman legal principles, gather evidence, test hypotheses, reach conclusions based on proof. But growing acceptance of acupuncture, meditation, and preventive care reflects Chinese medical philosophy that sees health as systemic balance rather than mechanical repair. The Internet itself embodies this synthesis. The hardware uses Chinese innovations, paper-thin circuits, magnetic storage, precision manufacturing. The software architecture follows Roman principles, logical structures, systematic organization, rule-based processing. Social media combines Chinese network thinking with Roman public forum concepts. But perhaps most importantly, our approach to crisis management blends both traditions. Modern societies use Roman institutional flexibility, changing laws, restructuring organizations, adapting systems, combined with Chinese cultural continuity, preserving core values, maintaining social networks, emphasizing education and family stability. The COVID pandemic revealed this synthesis clearly. Successful countries used Roman-style institutional coordination, centralized decision-making, legal enforcement, resource mobilization, combined with Chinese-style social cohesion, collective responsibility, long-term thinking, community support networks. Climate change challenges require both approaches. We need Roman engineering solutions, massive infrastructure projects, technological fixes, regulatory frameworks, and Chinese philosophical adaptation, changing consumption patterns, accepting natural limits, thinking in generational timescales. The global competition between the United States and modern China is actually a continuation of this ancient rivalry, but with roles partially reversed. America represents evolved Roman approaches, military superiority, institutional flexibility, cultural assimilation, individual rights. China represents evolved Chinese approaches, technological innovation, long-term planning, collective harmony, educational excellence. But here's the twist. Both modern powers are hybrids. America uses Chinese-derived technologies within Roman-inspired institutions. China uses Roman-influenced legal frameworks to manage Chinese-style economic development. The future will likely belong to civilizations that best integrate both traditions. The real question isn't which empire won, but how we can consciously combine their best features. Roman institutional strength with Chinese technological innovation. Roman individual rights with Chinese social harmony, Roman crisis flexibility with Chinese long-term thinking. We are the inheritors of both traditions, and our future depends on learning from both ancient laboratories of human civilization. If this deep dive into hidden history blew your mind, smash that subscribe button, hit like to feed the algorithm, and comment below with which Roman or Chinese influence in your daily life surprised you most. The past isn't dead. It's literally running your life right now.